Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm gonna be testing a GeForce GTX 1066GB model in Assassin's Creed Shadows. Now this is below system requirements. This game asks for a GTX 1070 at its minimum, so I'm not expecting much here, honestly. And this one is the MSI Gaming X version of the card. I am running it with the latest Nvidia drivers and I'm not manually overclocking it, although you know what? Let's overclock it. Let's give it the best shot here in Assassin's Creed Shadows on a GTX 1060. So this is actually factory OC'd out of the box, so I'm just pushing it a little bit further. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power Ups GPU-Z, and over on the left I'm pairing it with the i5-12600KF CPU, overclocked to 5.1 GHz and 32 GB of DDR5. Let's get into it, shall we? And well guys, as you can see, this is starting with pretty playable FPS, I guess. It's 30s, it's not terrible, right? And going over the settings, you can see that it's running at 1080p resolution using TAA, native AA, and the lowest settings. This is the low settings preset, which is also lowest settings. You can't really disable any of these that are on low. Now, whenever you start lowering resolution here in Assassin's Creed Shadows, you don't usually get a lot of FPS. So I'm wondering if FSR 3 on like quality, for example, will actually save this card from dropping from 30 FPS. Actually, over here, this is really terrible right now. It's dropping into the mid-20s, cinematic frame rates there, 24 frames per second, you know. It doesn't look awful, actually. This is low settings, you know. I'd like to have seen a very low settings preset, for example, for it to look even worse and play well on stuff like GTX 1060s and RX 580s and so on. But yeah, this is the low preset. It doesn't really go lower than this. Wait. What are you walking on? Oh, that's very interesting. What? Nice sandals, dude. Okay. This guy is very cold, by the way, because of the rain. That's nice to see, you know? Most people are actually chilling here, and it's raining and stuff, but that guy, nah. he's not having a great time here, as he shouldn't be because it's raining, you know? Nobody likes to be all moist and stuff. Anyway, this is really terrible of an experience once again, guys. And if you have a GTX 1060, don't buy this game. It doesn't really give you enough FPS, at least at 1080p resolution, for it to be an enjoyable experience. But we still have FSR frame generation and, well, the upscaler as well to kind of save the day, maybe, I don't know. Let's try that frame generation over native resolution first. This is going to make it still run at native resolution, of course, but now it's going to be a much smoother experience. Unfortunately, though, the input lag is absolutely insane right now. Because the baseline FPS were below 30 frames per second, it just sucks completely. There's no way around it, my friends. Also, the shadow is still running at like 15 FPS. I don't know what's going on with the shadows. I noticed that same thing. The shadow just doesn't seem to be rendered properly with frame generation in place. Anyway, you can't see it. This might actually look very good to you and playable, and if there wasn't any input lag, it would be. It's 40 plus FPS basically all of the time at this point. But again, input lag is absolutely insane. So even though the frame generation in this game is really good and it's low in input lag and so on, it's only low if you are at 40 FPS at the very least baseline, and we were in the 20s, so yeah, it's not going to be playable here. It pretty much sucks, once again. So I would never play like this. I would actually prefer to play with 20 FPS or 25 FPS locked all of the time instead of this experience with FSR, because the input lag is really, really bad right now. So let's go ahead. You know what? Let's try TAA quality here. Instead of going right away to FSR 3, which is usually a bit more intensive on these 10 series GPUs, then lowering down the resolution, or TAA, and well, it's getting us 30 plus at the moment. That's not too bad, although this is not inside of the city yet. It's just out in the open, and it's way less intensive here. So let's do our little benchmark run throughout this little town area. Also, have we seen Miguel already, or Jack? You know what, we need to see those bastards. Where are they? This makes it a semi-playable experience. It really depends on the person you ask, you know. I think it's playable if it only drops to like 20 9 FPS, maybe 28 minimum ever, you know, but it's not a good experience. I would still not buy the game to play at 30 FPS or like 28 plus FPS all of the time. Oh my gosh, this one is really cute. What the heck? What are you, buddy? Very nice. Okay, and he screeched, you know, like anyway, let's go this way. I went to see it inside of the forest. Now that we're getting a semi-playable experience once again, it's not as bad as I thought it would be, honestly. Like, I think Forspoken, which is a UE5 title, it was one of the first ones that came out. It looks way worse than this, and it ran worse as well with the GTX 1060. So this is not the worst performance ever seen, worst optimization ever seen, you know. At least it still looks decent on low settings. Once again, I wish it looked worse, or it had a very low preset for these older GPUs, but it doesn't. But yeah, in terms of visuals, it's definitely acceptable on the GTX 1060, you know. And in terms of performance, again, it is barely playable, but it is still playable. Some people would actually enjoy the game like this, I think, even though the graphics are now a little bit fuzzy because of quality TAA and pixelated in some areas, as well as like the low settings not being amazing, you know. Like you see a lot of popping. That's the major issue I have here with low settings, as well as the blendiness of the game, you know. But when the sun hits right, it actually can look really good still, even on the low settings, as you can see here with all of these reflections and so on. Obviously, they're not accurate or high quality, but it looks good, in my opinion, overall, for low settings, okay? Let's stop it right there, and let's try it with some FSR instead. It's FSR 3.1, all right, and still on the lowest settings. And I really hope, yeah, that's a little bit... You know what? I was gonna say it's a little bit better than TAA quality, but then I started moving around and everything becomes really pixelated when you do so. You can see around the character, there's a ton of pixelation. Look at the left arm, for example. I mean, that's really bad. What the hell, dude? How is TAA quality better than FSR 3.1 quality? That's really weird. FPS-wise, by the way, I thought FSR quality would be a bit more intensive than TAA quality, but it seems to be kind of the same. Yeah, dropping to 29 frames per second right there. Exactly where it dropped to 29 frames per second with TAA quality. But again, I really expected FSR quality to look better. Still, the FSR implementation is good at higher resolutions, but it seems like at 1080p resolution, it is pretty crappy, my friends. It just is. It just is. I'm not enjoying what I'm seeing here, but I did enjoy seeing even like performance FSR at 4K resolution. So at higher resolutions, it will actually look really decent. At 1080p, no. What about XeSS? Oh boy, wait a second. Maybe I shouldn't have switched to XeSS because that's usually really bad in 10 series GPUs, but not in this game. All right. Okay, that's actually not too bad. And in terms of pixelation, there's much less pixelation issues than there were with FSR quality here. Although I think you can definitely notice a bit of a difference in terms of FPS here compared to the previous forms of upscaling. So TAA quality is probably the best way to go, guys. However, it's not really dropping too much from 30 FPS. We saw like 29 already. All right. Where did we come from? But yeah, as you can see, 27, 26. Okay. Definitely more intensive in some areas, guys. We didn't really see it dropping to 26 with TAA quality. Over here, 28, 27 again. Yeah, it's a little bit worse in terms of FPS. It's a little bit better looking as well compared to the other upscalers, I guess, that we can try on the 1060, but not worth using since it drops a lot more often into the 20s. Let's do quality DLSS again, and now with frame generation on top of it. I like that you can actually play the game with a 6GB GPU, you know. There are other titles where 6GB are just not enough, even on lowest quality. Hello, Miguel, how's it going, buddy? I can barely see you with the noise and stuff, but there he is. There he is. Miguel is a very fast runner. Very nice. Now, the baseline FPS were in the 30s. So, of course, enabling frame generation won't really quite literally double your frame rate, unfortunately, because the frame gen is also a little bit intensive on the GPU. So you end up getting 50-ish FPS with the input lags of around half of the frame rate that we're seeing here, so 20s. And that feels really bad. Okay. So again, it's just like I've said in other videos of Assassin's Creed Shadows. In this game, the frame gen is really good in terms of input lag and visuals, but you need at the very least 40 frames per second for it to be enjoyable. So around 75 plus FPS with frame gen enabled. And that's not happening. It looks good, it looks smooth, of course, especially on YouTube, but it feels really bad to the point where I wouldn't consider this playable. There are some people out there that would consider this playable, of course, like everyone's opinion is different, especially when it comes to perceivedness of input lag and so on. But in my opinion, guys, I think... Hello. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't know that you were bad people. I just assumed. Maybe they are, I don't know. Alright, there we go. Yeah, we didn't get desynchronized, so they are bad people indeed. Okay. Or maybe we did get it. I just disabled the HUD, you know, because I don't like it for the thumbnails. It's a little bit more bearable when it's above 60 FPS, but it's still not good in terms of input lag, and I wouldn't really do this. Okay, I'd prefer 30 FPS locked to 60 FPS with frame generation enabled. So let's disable frame generation again, and so far it's not been amazing, you know. And let's try performance TAA. Oh boy. It feels bad saying it, actually. It feels wrong saying performance TAA. But at least we're getting like up to 60 FPS natively without the frame generation's help. And in terms of pixelation and just the visual quality right here, it's bad. Yeah, you can definitely tell a lot of issues with the picture right now. Getting a little bit darker though, so it's going to be harder to spot those imperfections. But pretty much everywhere you can see a ton of aliasing, a ton of pixelation as well, especially when moving like this. You know, you can definitely tell it's at a much lower resolution. And it is running at 540p at the moment. So it's pretty low, but it is enough for us to get 30 plus FPS all over the time. So I say that if you are playing on something like a Steam Deck's display, which you probably aren't, with the GTX 1060, right? I think it would be playable and it would be enjoyable with this performance and these visuals. But on a big display, I'm using a 27-inch 1080p display right here, it looks really pixelated. I mean, even at native resolution, it does look a little bit pixelated at the 1080p 27 inches, so there's that. But even on like a 24-inch 1080p display, this will look really pixelated. It is TAA upscaling that we're using here, coming from 540p after all, so don't expect miracles, right? Anyway, what about balanced TAA over here? Let's check that out. Oh, it drops into the low 30s already, so I think, yeah, it's inevitably going to drop into the 20s, just like it did with quality. There's not that big of a difference coming from quality TSR, no, it's not TSR, it's TAA upscaling. Gosh, so many names, man, of different upscalers and so on. But yeah, it's very similar in terms of FPS, as you can see. Maybe it drops a little bit less from 30, but it still drops from 30, you know? And it's slightly more pixelated at the same time, so I don't really like it too much, but it depends on personal preference. I think I would stick to quality. I'm gonna change it to quality right here. Yeah, the difference is 41% to 52% in terms of pixel count. Yeah, look at that. Still, instead of 30... and 31, 28, 29. Okay, so it's more intensive here than it was in the city. But I think the weather change also dropped our FPS by a bit. I'm not sure what I would utilize, guys. Maybe balanced TAA is the best way to go. Unless you're okay with some drops inside of forest areas and not really inside of cities, you know. then it's gonna be okay. Pick your poison, I guess. It's not gonna be great, really, so might as well just stick to other Assassin's Creed titles like Valhalla. Will run absolutely fine on GTX 1060. But let's drop it down to 720p resolution. Native AA is being utilized again, lowest settings. I mean, I really don't like 720p with all of this grass moving and stuff like that with the wind. It just kills all of the detail that was there at 1080p. Even TAA quality did look a little bit better than this, and balanced not so much. It was a little bit more pixelated for sure. And here at 720p resolution, it's getting us 30 plus FPS, I guess. Even in the dense forest areas. Lots of vegetation, as you can see. Doesn't drop from 30, so if you want that 30 FPS locked experience all of the time, 29, oh boy, 28. Damn it. This is still not it, if you want that. Oh, damn. Okay, well, we're below system requirements. I can't really get too mad at this, honestly, guys. The 1060 is just not having it, really. At least inside of forest areas. Out here, it's a smoothish experience with 30s, 40s most of the time. It's not terrible, right? Whoa, look at that, 30, 29 over here as well. So it's not only in the forest that it will drop. Oh, damn it. No. I was really expecting this to be 30 plus, you know, at least in city areas, but no, it still drops, guys. It still drops at 720p resolution in lowest settings possible. Ah, what a shame. What a shame. We gained, what, 10 FPS, I think, from 1080p native to 720p native. And it's just not enough scaling here. It is what it is. If you want to play this game like this, now you know the performance of a GTX 1060. I'm gonna drop it down to like, you know what, let's do performance TAA at 720p resolution. This is 360p resolution actually right now. And yeah, it seems like the GTX 1060 is great for a 360p experience. It doesn't look anywhere near 360p resolution. So again, good job to the upscaler that they're utilizing here with TAA, because it does a great job of upscaling that picture. This would be a totally pixelated mess. Actually, if I utilize FSR performance here at 720p, it might be a pixelated mess because that was a bit more pixelated than this. So let's try that out. FSR performance. Yeah, this is so bad now. Alright. But hey, this is the way to get 30 plus FPS all of the time. I guess like quality FSR or quality TAA at 720p would also get that, because it only dropped to like 28 previously at native 720p, but still. So I wouldn't really do that, but well, let's try it out since we're here and this video is a bit smaller than usual. Hello, Jack and Mini Jack. Wait, where's Mini Jack? Mini Jack? Is it? Oh my God. That Mini Jack is even smaller than that one. Look at this. Look at this Mini Jack over here. So cute. Meow to me, Mini Jack. Meow to me. I'm protecting you from the rain. Yes. Yes. What the heck? Okay. Anyway, guys, that's about it for this one. Still dropping into the 30s very often. Low 30s as well with quality TAA at 720p. That's a bit of a shame, but again, it's nothing new. We already know that this game scaling between resolutions is really, really poor. Thanks very much for watching. Catch you in the next one. Love you all. Bye-bye.